Hey there, and welcome to the Coaching Floors podcast. This is Dr. Jen, and each week we'll be doing interviews to inform our listeners about techniques to help children with complex communication needs discover their voice with AAC. Stay tuned. Welcome back as we continue this week with our interview with Laurie as she shares her insight on overcoming a brain tumor and advocating for children with complex communication needs. Tell me about a struggle you encountered and how you overcame it. If you just had a struggle.
Okay.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I could tell you about 100.
Well, I've had to come to terms with the fact that I can't go back to the person I was before the tumor. Mm-hmm. And I still get frustrated by not being able to communicate things that I know that I would have said before more clearly. And sometimes I have to accept that the energy expenditure is not worth the gain. And, you know, I was always one to have the last word or get my point across, especially when it came to arguing with my kids. I'm guilty of that.
They might like this.
Yeah. I know my one son does. You know, I have to consider the time expenditure, and if it's not worth the gain, don't say it. Mm-hmm. And I've gone from using a marker board and PECs in the ICU and experiencing echolalia to not being detectable to the average person who doesn't know me well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I've also had to accept that I probably won't be able to resume work as a therapist, but I'm trying to find ways around that, possibly by doing group therapy with clients with cancer or veterans who may have traumatic brain injuries, mm-hmm. because that's essentially what happened to me. Yeah. Like, they were digging around in my brain. You know, that has an effect on the brain. Mm-hmm. And fatigue from speaking extensively takes a toll on me, so I need to take that into consideration. Someone at a conference, brain tumor conference that was at Mayo, said that her dad puts on a baseball hat to say that he has to power down. And I go into the bedroom to rest, and I tell people that I'm checking out. Like, I told my son the other night with my family that we went to a busy restaurant and there were TVs all around, and I said, just know that I'm going to check out, you know, right when we leave here, and don't be offended by it. So I have to say things like that because I get too overwhelmed, but I know my limits. So the key is knowing one's limits. And I've always pushed the boundaries with my limits, and I'm uneasily accepting that I have to adhere to my limits more, and my family is good about accepting that I need breaks.
I am going off script. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about how it felt to have echolalia? You know, was that hard because you were just echoing was it that you echoed what people said, or you echoed what was on TV? Tell me just a little bit more about that and how that felt.
Well, mostly I noticed it generally in the hospital, for the most part at UW, and I was there 5 days, and I noticed that the nurses would ask me a question and give me a choice, mm-hmm. and I'd automatically pick the second of the two.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to pick the first, mm-hmm. but I couldn't pick it. Like,
did they catch on to that? And then oh, shoot.
I had to write echolalia on the marker board.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you could do that and that you know that that's what that was. And
well, I had previous training.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
so that had to be frustrating when you're not even selecting it. You're just echoing it back.
Like, for instance, they offered me chocolate or vanilla pudding, or it was vice versa. Vanilla or chocolate pudding. And I wanted vanilla, but I couldn't, even though I wanted it, I couldn't say
Chocolate pudding came out.
Yeah. And I was equally surprised.
So then did you have behavior, sorry, but then did you start to throw a fit or anything? No, it's not what I wanted. Waving your hands or...
Honestly, I didn't have the effect that other people with brain injuries do by being unpredictable and having behaviors. And but I really wanted to, so I managed it. But I know that one time when OT came in, they were fitting me for the brace, and I wanted to say something, and I just started crying. And I turned away from her, and she knew that I was upset. And I later apologized to her, but I would have never done that, ever.
But you're under significant stress, holy cow. I can't imagine. I typically work with children who use AAC. Is there anything different or unique we should consider for adults?
Yeah, determine how they use communication to function in their daily life and what the source of difficulty is. I was so frustrated at first because I couldn't pinpoint my struggle, and I had determined that it was working memory, and my cognitive functioning faculties were intact, and my writing was intact, but it's like having a bottleneck when I had to convert my thoughts into speech, and it was like learning a new language at first, and I wanted to say so much, but I could only fit so much out of my mouth. And I function much better with writing than I do talking on the phone. And I don't mind. I used to not mind talking on the phone, but it gives me anxiety to do so now. And one way that I have a workaround is I tend to email people more, tend to text. My husband makes phone calls that are unavoidable. My memory used to be like a steel trap, and my working memory is not good at all. And I use Lumosity and word games to build up stamina. And, kids, I've realized, don't probably do things out of spite or wanting to act naughty. It's probably fatigue or inattention or brain fog. There's a whole host of other factors that all create speech difficulties. I can tell I'm getting tired and I'm stumbling more. And we don't know what kids' speech
is being impacted by.
Yeah.
Trisha, when I interviewed her and was talking about children throwing temper tantrums, and she said, Jen, a lot of times it's not because they're mad, because I was going at that angle. And she said a lot of times it's because they need help.
Yep.
But you're also bringing up a lot of times it could be fatigue, and being tired, and maybe we just don't know.
Maybe they didn't get sleep from the night before from the storm.
Yeah.
It all impacts speech. And, maybe there's a different bus driver and they didn't know if they'd get to school. We don't know what goes through kids' mind.
Yeah.
I want to bring up a point that everybody has distractions, and I had rehab at Mercy, and the jackhammering was an issue because of the new cancer center that was being built on, and it significantly inhibited my progress. And we had to schedule the
sessions.
Yeah. And and the garbage truck came to empty the dumpster, and I could notice that. And often sensory things interfered with my communication. It's too hot. I have a headache or brain fog. There's noisy people in the waiting room. Mm-hmm. I pointed out to my speech pathologist several times, do you hear that noise? Never once did she hear it, but I could only focus on that. Mm-hmm. And it's the same way with kids. Imagine, from experience, all the distractions that are present at school.
Too many. There's tons of stuff on the walls. The lights make noises, the heater. The other day was the water fountain.
Some kid could be looking at a pen on the table.
Shuffling feet.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
For a child to try to focus.
Mm-hmm.
The goal of this podcast is to help people discover their voice with AAC. If you could give us one tip, trick, or strategy, what would it be?
I think don't ever think that communication tools are optional. I was guilty of that when I was working in a preschool. I forgot PECs from time to time, the iPad from time to time with a kid. It's a recipe for behaviors, frustration, and distrust. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I liken it to house keys or car keys, a wedding ring, a watch, a Prox card. Anybody would feel lost without those things. And, you wouldn't like to have your voice turned off with the volume when you're talking, and neither do kids. Mm-hmm. And it's imperative to have communication tools. And, if you can't have access to the iPad or they forget it at home, substitute with PECs.
Mm-hmm. Have a backup system.
Yeah.
When I do trainings, I have a picture of a person with duct tape over their mouth.
Yeah.
And I said, this is what it's like if the device is not with them.
Mm-hmm. You feel lost without your phone.
I would not go anywhere without it.
No.
Or my watch, like you said. Or my wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's always with me. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Well, I considered this question extensively, and I decided that what I want to get across is everyone has struggles, visible or not. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't know that I had brain tumor surgery if you saw me in the store, and people often don't know unless they follow me on Facebook. And I've had for kids and adults who have a lot of empathy, I have a lot of empathy for kids and adults who have communication difficulties, way more than I ever did before. And I can't help but find meaning in my situation because my cognitive and writing skills are as good as they ever were. And so I pride myself on educating people and advocating for populations that may not be in the position to do so. And I want to contribute to society, and people with communication obstacles do too.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I really appreciate it, and you've added a lot to the conversation for our children and our students with AAC. So thank you. If you could, subscribe to the podcast so you get notified when new episodes are released, and check out Coaching Flores on Facebook and coachingflores.com for downloads. I hope you heard something that inspires you. I'll see you next week.